Gail. Welcome back to my channel. My name's Chandra and thank you so much for watching. Today's video is my top 10 books I could read over and over and over again. And these are my most read books. And since February is the month of love, I figured I would share the books that I love with you. So here goes. 1. The Tales of Beedle the Bard. I've read this book 3 times. Granted, it is a very short book and it is a children's-ish book. I don't know, I have questions. My favorite story out of this collection is The Wizard's Hairy Heart. If you haven't read it, I definitely recommend. Regardless of how I feel about the author, which I don't really want to get into because then I'll just get mad, I do really love the stories. If you haven't read The Tales of Beedle the Bard, specifically The Wizard's Hairy Heart, it is a short story I definitely recommend. Number 2, Lolita. I've read this book 3 times as well. Originally, I read it because I was going through and reading all of the classics. I came back to it because every time I have read it, I learn something new. I come to a new understanding of it. I also get this feeling. It's so strange. The author's ability to elicit empathy is so profound, and I've never been able to quite put my finger on what it is about the style that evokes empathy. And I find that fascinating as an author, also just as a reader. It is disturbing. I mean, if you know anything about the book, it's one of I think probably a lot of people hesitate to read it because of its content, and I think that's a valid concern. But I also think it is a fantastic book, and it breaks my brain every time. So I continue to read it to try to understand, because it is so diabolical. Number 3, Sunshine. I've read this book 2 or 3 times. I'm not sure exactly how many times because I think maybe I missed logging it one time. It is a standalone by McKinley. It is a vampire urban fantasy, I think. That sounds right. Vampire urban fantasy. I feel like even if you don't love vampires, Sunshine is fantastic. I do like vampires, but I feel like I'm pretty unbiased in this case. Part of the reason I like it so much is because there's so much world building that goes into it without it being oppressive. It leaves a lot of questions, which I feel like add to the mystery of it. It also takes a different approach to vampires, and there's a lot of other mythology in the world that I really enjoy. I think it's very creative. I think it's unique. I think the characters have a lot of depth without being totally given away. And every time I read it, I just really enjoy it. There's always, I think I read it most recently, 2020, and as I was rereading it, I was like, what? There was so much stuff that I forgot had happened, and it just made my heart happy to read it again. It was like reading it, and it was like I'd never read the book, if that makes sense. Like I remembered enough about it, but I also didn't remember enough about it to enjoy it like it was the first time. It's so good. Number 4, Far from the Madding Crowd. I've read this book twice. I've watched the movie a bunch of times. It is, from what I've read of Thomas Hardy, it is the least tragic book that he writes. All of his characters seem to have just awful stuff happen to them. In Far from the Madding Crowd, yes, there's the awful stuff that happens, but there's also this ray of sunshine, this little silver lining to the clouds. The characters are compelling. I empathize with each of them for different reasons, really. And Bathsheba, she she's frustrating, but she's still so likable. She's a strong, independent woman. She's fair-minded. She's intelligent. She's strong-willed. And that does get her into trouble, but at the same time, it's like she wouldn't be such a great character if it weren't for the things that get her into trouble. Like, the story wouldn't happen without that. I don't know. It is one of my all-time favorites. Number 5. We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. I've read this book 2 times. There's also a movie out with Tessa something. I can't think of her name. It is the girl from I can't think of the show either. It's a popular show and it has people in it. I'll put it in the comments because my brain just was like, no, we're not going to do it. We're not going to remember. We Have Always Lived in the Castle. I've read this book twice, maybe 3 times. I feel like 3, but again, I didn't always keep the best track of when I read books. So this is a little bit flexible. The important thing, I've read it multiple times, and each time, again, I learn new things. There were some things that I read it through the first time. The second time, I read something on a forum where they were discussing the book, and I'm not going to say what it was, because if you read it and you want to read it multiple times, I feel like I would only want to tell someone who I knew had already read it through once what it was that I found out. But when I found this thing out, I immediately went back and reread the book. And it totally changed my perspective, but in a good way. It was a good book to begin with, but then on the second read through, it made the author's writing ability so much more impressive because it was great. If you haven't read it, read it. It's, again, not a super long book, but I absolutely love it. Number 6, Iced by Karen Marie Moning. I have read pretty much everything she's written at this point. I'm still finishing the Highlander series. I think I've got maybe 3 or 4 books left in that, but the Fever series, I've read the whole thing. Iced, I picked that, well, not just because I've read it twice, because I've read several other books twice from the series, but Iced is from a different perspective than most of the books. Most of the books are from Michaela's perspective. Iced is from Danny's perspective. If you're familiar with the series, you'll know who I'm talking about. Otherwise, it's just kind of whatever. But Danny is a really interesting character and kind of a controversial character. Again, if you've read anything, if you've read the series or you know some controversy from the author's perspective, and some of the readership haven't really liked the way that she's handled some things about the character, which I won't get into. But I feel like Iced gave a much more interesting look into Danny because she is such an interesting character. And she's young, but she's also worldly wise just because of the life that she's lived. And it's, as an adult, I was interested in what this child's perspective of the world was. And I found that really interesting. I actually have started this book again because I just really genuinely enjoy it. Also, she has a pet that's her companion, and he is so crotchety, reminiscent of the Cheshire Cat. I'm not gonna lie, it kind of seems like a ripoff of the Cheshire Cat. I don't care. I really love him. He's fantastic. Oh, the other thing that I love about her pet is that no one can see the pet but her, and it's interdimensional and all this wonderful stuff, but definitely read it. Blameless. The next 3 books, 7, 8, and 9, are in a series. It is the Soulless series. I reread, Blameless, Changeless, and Soulless. I reread them all because the 4th book in the series was either coming out or had come out, and I somehow missed that it was happening, but it had been so long since I read the other books that I went back and reread them all so that I could reread the fourth book fresh. It is steampunk, and it is so good. It is also the first steampunk that I've really read, I think. That sounds correct. And it's so... it just makes me happy. It's great. The characters, again, main character is opinionated, strong-willed, independent woman, doesn't think she'll ever get married, ends up getting married. The guy that I should mention this. The first one is a steampunk romance. And the romance arc stays in the series, but it's just so clever and so fun. And her husband is crotchety, and I think it's great. Her best friend, also, I like the dynamic because they seem incompatible as friends, but they're really good for each other. And it's also a thing where sometimes as women we tend to underestimate each other, and it showed that in a really positive way of just like, you can trust your friends in ways that you don't think you can. And I thought that it was really beautifully told. It's also so funny. The characters are hilarious. I literally would be like listening to this book somewhere in public and just start laughing and just be like, I look crazy, but it's so funny. I really enjoyed the series. Number 10, Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter? I think it's by Karen Slaughter. I don't have it on my notes, I just put the title in there. Anyway, it is so good. It is dark. Karen Slaughter writes thrillers, horror. I'm a little fuzzy on the genre, but I enjoy it. It is about sisters who are diametrically opposed. They don't get along at all. There's some kind of shenanigans happening in the background and nobody really knows what it is. And in the midst of all this drama, basically the sisters are able to become friends again and save each other. I really enjoyed it. It was surprising and dark and twisty and just all the goodness. So if you like psychological thrillers, I think that's the genre. If you like stuff like that, I would give it a shot. Pretty much anything by Karen Slaughter, though, is absolutely great. So those are my 10 books. Love them. Happy Valentine's Day. And you can follow me. Oh, wait, words, man. I was going to say, you can follow me on social media at cchanwright. Tell me what you think about the books, if you happen to read them, or if you've already read them. I would love to hear. And I will see you all next time. Bye.